speaker for this class is the prettiest member of the Feast Bible Nerds. Yes, I do agree. She also serves as a worship leader at the feast and a youth head of Youth Home Taft. Oh, di ba? Youth Home Taft! Oh, di ba? All right. She is a freelance writer and the owner of Author's Daughter Bookshop. Let's all welcome Tisha Alisa Caro.
Hi guys! Thank you for coming to this Bible Lab. Anybody here who attended our Bible Lab classes yesterday? Wow! So, na-convince nga kayo ni Ben and ni Kuya Mon and Father Albert to come and finish this Bible Lab with us. We're really excited. There's so much in store for our Bible Lab classes today, and so we hope you guys enjoy. So, thank you for that introduction, but just for me to introduce myself again, my name is Tisha, one of the prettiest member of the Bible Nerds. Kasi, tama, wala naman silang choice kasi ako lang yung girl. And we're the team of researchers under Tito Bo who helped create the talks at the feast. But you also might know me when I serve my role as a worship leader. I graduated from DLSU Manila with a Bachelor of Arts in Literature, major in Literary and Cultural Studies. So, largely, it's really because of the Bible. That's why I took literature. And so I love reading, I love writing. I have a bookshop, if you want to check it out on Instagram. It's called Author's Daughter Bookshop. There's also like a place where I get to share my favorite books and also like Bible books like these ones. By the way, you can peruse these guys before or after our Bible Lab classes, so you can check them out. These are commentaries and just the things that we read from Bible scholars who do the hard work for us. We're just here to like communicate with you guys. But yeah, I love brewing coffee too. Anybody here who loves coffee? Yeah, I can see so many people carrying yardstick cups. Yeah, and most of all, I love the Bible. And one of the things that changed my relationship with the Bible was learning how to read it. So we've all read Genesis 1. Yeah? Yeah? Probably anyone here who hasn't read Genesis 1? Oh, di ba? Wala. Oh, you. Well, you will today. But Genesis 1, it's one of those stories that introduce us to the Bible. Like, have you read like a children's book and the first page is always Genesis 1? I mean it is the first page of the Bible. But we've all read Genesis 1, and or at least tried to for some. Usually, when we start reading the Bible in a year, right, or just when we just want to try building the habit of reading the Bible, the first instinct, right, is page 1. And we try to read through Genesis 1. And so we're all familiar with it. But what if I told you that Genesis 1 was a poetic masterpiece? Like, all of us have read it straight. But what if I tell you that it's poetry? One that we can't really appreciate just by, just reading through the lines. Have you ever noticed when you read Genesis 1 that there are repeating words? Yeah? Can anybody give me an example? What are some of the repeated words in Genesis 1 that you notice?
God said.
And God said.
Blessing yung question ng series.
Yes, that's right. We went through Genesis. again, Genesis 1 is something that we always talk about at the feast, right? Anything else apart from "and God said"? What other things are constantly repeated? Sorry?
Adam and Eve.
I don't think they're in Genesis 1 yet. I don't think, I mean, like they're named. Yeah. Let there be. That's right. Let there be. Again and again, we're told. So, Genesis 1 is actually filled with repeating words. And they're not just simply there for no reason, actually. If you've been listening through the Bible classes yesterday, we already talked about how the biblical authors make use of repeated words to point out something, to highlight something, and they also use it as a poetic style. They repeat, and if we pay attention, we'll see a pattern. So today we will explore what Genesis 1 is actually trying to say by looking through these patterns and through these repeated words. And remember, Genesis 1 is not a story of how God created the world, but it's a story of why. So, why did God create the world? What's interesting about the Bible is that it tells the message not just by simply saying it, but the way it's written. And so one of that is through poetry. Anybody here who loves reading poetry? No, not really. I mean, gets ko naman. Because if people actually enjoyed reading poetry, then maybe Tito Bo would have written a poetry book, right? But not really. Why? Because we prefer things to be more direct and clear and straight to the point. We like that. But that's the unique thing about poetry. It's using less words than normal speech. And it uses a lot of imagery to help you imagine and feel things. It uses words with special effects. So, the authors intentionally use this language, even though it's like quite more complicated than the straight to the point way of saying things. They use it in a more creative way, and each word is carefully chosen, carefully crafted, placed next to each other for a reason. For example, Genesis 1, in the NIV, it says that now the earth was formless and empty. In Hebrew, it's described as tohu vavohu. Can you say that with me? Tohu vavohu. Do you notice how it kind of rolls off the tongue, right? It's fun to say tohu vavohu. Yeah, it's kind of like she sells seashells, right? Or Peter Piper. It has rhyme. And it's interesting because in the beginning, what do we imagine? Nothing. Darkness, a blank slate, emptiness. Well, tohu vavohu means an empty wilderness, like a desert. And another way we translate it in English is wild and waste. Our English translations chose wild and waste, WW, to give it a little bit of alliteration, to try to copy what it feels like to say tohu vavohu. So they say it in wild and waste, right? So it's kind of like it has rhyme. Genesis 1 has rhyme. So in the beginning, it was like an empty wilderness, but also like a vast ocean. Darkness was over the face of the deep abyss, but the breath or wind of God was hovering over the face of the waters. These 3 verses, they give us 3 particular images to imagine how the author saw the beginning, the pre-creation state. That's how he paints the picture. The land was wild and waste, darkness over the face of the waters, and the Spirit of God, the breath of God, hovering over the face of the waters. What's interesting is in Hebrew, when we count these words, these three lines make up how many words? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 words. These three lines, 14 words, 7 times 2 words. And if we go to the first verse, in the beginning, God created the skies and the land. How many words is it in Hebrew? 7. So the previous three lines made up of 2 times 7 words. The first line is made out of 7 words. So it's interesting. Not only does Genesis 1 has rhyme, it also has meter. Meter in poetry is like you count the syllables, but here they have a count of the Hebrew words. So, just by looking at this, we see how the biblical authors have actually chosen these few words intentionally to give Genesis 1 structure. And if we put it in a visual way, we see this. Genesis 1 opens with 3 sets of 7 words, and it ends with another 3 sets of 7 words. And we see, so both they're the same. They kind of parallel. It's poetry. And we wouldn't have known that if we didn't know Hebrew, right? We wouldn't have known that if we were just reading it straight. Isn't this like a work of art? And if we didn't know how the biblical authors wrote this, then we would have missed the point. Notice how these 3 sets of 7 words surround the 6 days. It's almost like it's framing it. And guess what? Of course, the 6 days are connected too. And they also use repeated words to do that. How does each day begin? And God said. So, the Bible authors use repeating words. They create matching symmetries, patterns, structures, and we need to notice when they repeat things. And you might have read a story in the Bible before where you see na parang, why do they keep repeating it again and again? Wala ba silang Grammarly or Google to just like search synonyms? Why can't they just do that, right? But repetition is one of the styles, and let's see how they do that in days 1 to 6. So Genesis 1, it opens identifying the 3 problems. What are they? Wild and waste, darkness, and deep abyss, the waters. And what's interesting is in days 1 to 3, they repeat these exact same words as each day goes on to address these problems. So, day 1, what does God do? He creates light and it contains the darkness. And in day 2,
Waters.
God separates and orders the waters. And in day 3,
Dry land and
yep,
edible plants.
emerge from the waters. That's right. So we see, just from this verse, they repeat the same words to show that God is addressing these 3 things in days 1, 2, and 3. Are you following me? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And another pattern we see in Genesis 1 is that each days 1, 2, and 3 involves an act of separating. What does God separate in day 1? Light and darkness. How about in day 2? What is above and what is below. And in day 3,
Dry land and edible plants in the water.
and on day 3, God separates the waters below from the dry land. and it creates a habitable space where life can flourish. So there, day 1, light separate from darkness, establishing time. Day 2, we have the skies where waters above, waters below separate, creating an ordered space, a dome. And in day 3, the waters below and dry land creates a habitable space. And then days 4 to 6, what about them? What do they do? After separating, after creating space, God goes back and then fills them. And day 4, God fills those space with sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, God fills the skies, the created space, the waters above and the waters below with fish and birds. And in day 6, God fills the dry land with land animals and humans. And both days have bonuses, a bonus act of God. In day 3, He lets the plants and seeds emerge from the ground. And on day 6, He tells the animals and the humans, go eat the seeds from the ground. So, days 1 to 3 describes the environment, the created space that God orders and creates. And days 4 to 6 describes the inhabitants, what fills the earth. And with all of this, you end up with a picture of the days, and it's all well ordered, well designed. It's as if how it's written is actually like just showing how God is bringing order to all of these things. We learn that creation is all about ordering and populating the skies and the land and everything. After everything, Genesis 2 verse 1 goes and says, and so were completed the skies and the land, days 1, 2, and 3, and all of their hosts, days 4, 5, and 6. Look at this. Yeah? Poetry. It's as if this literary design of Genesis 1 is communicating how God's creating order in this world. It's a good example of where literary structure mirrors the theological message of the text. But what if we zoom in? Because there's so much more. Days 1 and 2. 1 and 4. Let's look at it. Day 1 says, let there be light, and there was light. On day 4, it begins with, and God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the skies to separate the day from the night. Let's go back to day 1. God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. So on day 1, who's doing the separating and naming? It's God. But how about on day 4? Who's doing the separating? The lights. Let there be lights in the skies to separate. It's like God is handing over the authority to separate day and night to a creature. The lights are called rulers. They said they rule the day and the night. But God appoints another creature to rule. What's that? Humans. That's right. So far from day 1 and 4 are patterned. Day 4 and 6 are also a pattern. Day 4, God appoints the rulers below. Day 4, God appoints the rulers above. Day 6, God appoints the rulers below. And God said, let us make human in our image according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the land, and over every creeper that creeps on the land. On day 6, God created the humans in His image, and He gave them authority to rule over the fish, the birds, the land animals. But He makes them extra special. If you noticed, so far in the story, how does God create? By speaking, right? All over Genesis 1, we see, and God said, and then it happened. Actually, God said repeats 10 times all over Genesis 1. God creates through words. It is God's speech that creates reality. But we've just been seeing how God is delegating the authority. And in the next narrative, Genesis 2, we see, out of the ground, God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the sky and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called a living creature, that was its name. Now God presents all the animals, the land animals, the birds in the sky, and brings them to the human and then tells him, okay, you name it. That's interesting. So far, it was only God, and now He makes this human special and lets them do what He has been doing. And that's the last day. These humans mark the last created beings in the story. So why did God create the world? All the days, they point us towards this, the ending. Points us towards the 7th day. In fact, the structure we just saw seems to be highlighting how God sets apart the 7th day of creation as if that's the ultimate goal. And God completed on the 7th day His work which He had made. He rested on the 7th day. God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because on it He rested from all His work which God created to make. And this was set apart because, do you remember another thing that repeats all over Genesis 1 is, and it was evening, and it was morning, the first day. It was evening, and it was morning, the 2nd day. All days 1 to 6 has that. But day 7, it doesn't have that. It breaks the pattern, highlighting day 7, and it seems to say that day 7 has no end. It doesn't end. It's like it's the ultimate goal of creation. Sabbath, 7th day, rest. That's the ultimate goal of creation. After God created the world to bring order and life from chaos, He wants to dwell in it, along with His creation forever. There's no end. Forever. Ultimate goal. That's how it looks like. But did the story of God and His creation really end that way? If you look at our Bibles, medyo mahaba pa pagkatapos. Why? The rest of it, right? Because when you turn to the next page, we all know the story. We see how the 7th day gets broken when humans decide to take what God said not to take, when they decide that they don't want to follow the way God ordered the world, they want to be God. So they were banished from the garden. The images of God, who God allowed to name things, they were banished from the garden. And the ideal 7th day was no more. And here begins the problem that the rest of the Bible tries to solve. How can God dwell with humans again? How can we find Sabbath? How can we find rest again? How can we be fully in the presence of God again? And He does this by choosing a human who will represent all people and the one who will choose to partner with God. But in one way or another, we know the story too. These humans fail, right? Again and again, Noah Abraham, David, until God sends this one human who is also God. And his name is Jesus. He came into this world. He brought life to the sick and the dying, and he faced the brokenness and the deaths of this world and bore it all onto himself on the cross. And how does this connect to the first story of the Bible? You see, our biblical authors, even in the New Testament, there are big Bible nerds who also trace patterns across the books. And this one specifically we find in the Gospel of John. Let's read it together. John 20, verse 1. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So, in case kailangan ng context, this was after Jesus was nailed on the cross. This was already the third day. But how does John give a time or a date on that day? First day of the week. In other words, after Jesus' body is placed in the tomb, on the day when the stone had been taken away, John 20 begins on the 8th day. Jesus rose from the grave on the 8th day. We're no longer stuck on the broken, cliffhangered 7th day. Jesus' death and resurrection moved our story forward to the 8th day. And where does this take place? A few verses later, we find Mary talking to Jesus, but she doesn't know it was Jesus. Why? Because she thought he was a gardener. And where is a gardener? Where does he work? In a garden. Now, we're on the 8th day, and we're back in the garden where Jesus defeated death and rose to life, ushering us back into new creation. Because of him, we get to experience heaven on earth. Because of him, we get to have new life. We get to step into the presence of God again. And, there's still so much more to uncover in Genesis 1. This class, it only just really kind of tip of the iceberg. But no matter how many times you read it, there's always gonna be more. So my invitation to you guys is to not end here, to read it again. We're never done with the Bible. This is one of the books that we first read, or we've all read before, but there's always going to be something new. And that's why the Bible is meditation literature. It's something meant to be read over and over again for a lifetime. But we're going to do it together. And as you reread, we pray that we'll get to peel more and more and see it a new way every time. So that's it for Genesis 1 Biblical Poetry. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you guys. Sorry? Q&A. In case somebody has questions, I will try to answer them. Yes po.
Hindi ako magtatanong.
Yes.
Kasi nakapag-aral din naman.
Opo.
Yun, nakapag-aral din naman ako ng Bible. Ngayon, sa pag-aaral ko sa Bible, doon sa tinatawag na day 1 to 3, yun ang tinatawag na day of construction. Ngayon,
Right.
day 5 to 6, days of decoration.
Yes, that's right.
Ngayon, first of all, yung salitang create, yun ay ginagamit lamang para sa Diyos. Kasi To create is to make something from nothing.
That's right.
And to make is to make something from something.
That's right.
Kaya yung mga taong nagsasabing, nag-create ng gano'n, nag-create ng ganito, hindi ka makapag-create kasi meron kang ginamit na mga materyales para mo
Right.
magawa yung isang bagay.
Yes.
Ngayon, doon naman sa, kung mapapansin natin, doon sa day 1 to 6, day 1, sinabi doon sa bandang huli, nagkaroon ng umaga, nagkaroon ng gabi. First day.
Yes.
Ganun din sa second day. Nagkaroon ng umaga, nagkaroon ng gabi, second day. Saan ang galing yun, yung day? Na sa fourth day pa lamang gagawin yung moon and sun and stars. Kaya yun naman ang tinatawag na anachronism. Anachronism means ana is aga o una, chronos is panahon. Naaga sa panahon. Kaya hando pa lang, creation pa lang, nagkaroon ng day 1, day 2, day 3. Pero sa fourth day pa lang gagawin nyo. Sun, moon, and stars.
That's right.
Yun lang.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you for sharing that.
Kasi may natutunan na ako sa Bible about sa Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. At least yun ang natutunan ko yung sa Blessing and Curse about sa Bible series sa Genesis sa The Feast Last 2022. Yun lang.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Meron pa po? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. We're good.
Alright. We're good. Thank you so much, guys. So, ano po ang ating takeaway for today? Any takeaways po? Kung wala kayong question, ano yung takeaway? Ako may takeaway. My forever. Kasi sabi nga, di ba, on the 8th day, we were redeemed. So, may forever. Amen? Meron pa ba? Meron pang takeaway? Wala na. Masyado silang serious, but I was so happy with this Bible lab. Ang dami kong natutunan. Sana kayo din, meron din po kayong natutunan.